So I can't, now that I'm sharing things, I can't see comments and so on, but my colleagues here will let me know. I can't read from that far away. You just let me know. What I suggest as I go along here, if you have questions, type them into the chat room, and we've got 3 or 4 people here monitoring the chat room, and they will answer it. And if they think it's worth talking about, they'll interrupt me and help do that. So first of all, for those who haven't used WeBWorK very much, what is WeBWorK? It's an online mathematics homework system delivery. It's open source. You can download the source and install it yourself. That's why we're here. It's really been created for and by the mathematics academic community. So people with programming, mathematicians with programming experience and so on are principally responsible for creating most of the stuff here. We're starting to try and attract some computer science types to help perfect it, but it's really been developed from in-house for our own use, and that's actually one of its strengths. It's spreading to other mathematics, to other mathematically intense subjects at the moment, like physics and engineering and so on. It can be used in chemistry. There's actually there's a big growth pattern in that direction, but right at the moment, people from those communities haven't been using it in their courses yet. So until they start asking, I want this feature and that feature and so on, we probably won't. It'll spread slowly in those directions. Engineering is where it's doing the most. Okay. What I wanted to go through first is what happens with the round-trip requests. So WeBWorK is a client-server model. The student is looking at a problem displayed in their browser, and they type in an answer, and they click submit, and here's what happens. The browser sends the page that they've got, translates it a little bit, sends it to the Apache server, which is operating on the server that you have set up. So this is a piece of software that takes HTTP, processes it a little bit, and sets it forward in a way in which WeBWorK 2 can understand. So the Apache server comes first, and that's the first thing, one of the first things we'll have to install. Then, and in fact, that's where a lot of the installing work goes, is trying to install the Apache server and its infrastructure. Then this is sent to WeBWorK 2. Now, our software actually comes in 2 parts. WeBWorK 2 is the front end, and it does things like take the request and say, authenticate it. Is this a user that's actually registered in my course? And checks the authorization. Is this a student? Is this a professor? What are they allowed to do? That's all done in the WeBWorK 2 layer of the software. And then, since a problem has been rendered, the WeBWorK 2 also gathers a lot of information. If it's a student, they find out, their record, which set are they looking at, what are their grades, and all that kind of stuff. And then it sends all of that data to PG, and this is the layer of software where the problem template plus the seed, which tells me which random version of the problem template I'm going to produce, this is rendered a little program that takes that data and produces an HTML page, which eventually gets passed back to the student. So this part right here is the part that does all the fancy stuff about interpreting mathematics. It produces the answer evaluators. The math objects are produced here. PGML, if you've looked at that stuff, is that's all rendered here in this PG layer. This is the layer that's this is the layer that's most special to WeBWorK, the PG layer. It's the thing that makes it mathematics. The WeBWorK 2 is basically LMS, Learning Management System, or CMS, it used to be called, Course Management System. These are similar to Moodle and Blackboard and all that kind of stuff. The PG part is the part that's particularly special. And the database is MySQL. When WeBWorK is gathering data, it's got a lot of it stored locally, and it uses the MySQL database to, once it knows which student's looking at it, collects lots of other information on the student. Other questions on that? Any questions coming up, guys? Okay. So this is a summary of what I just told you. WeBWorK 2 does authentication. Who is it? Authorization. What permissions? And then it grabs all kinds of data from the database to flush things out. PG renders the problem. It needs the seed and the problem template to do this. one of the things that's true, we can talk about this later when we get to more advanced things, or recent developments in WeBWorK, PG can be used with other front ends. So, for example, if you're familiar with Moodle, there's a Moodle quiz type, and the Moodle quizzes are, Moodle is its own LMS, but we can plug the PG portion of WeBWorK in as a back end to just grade the mathematics parts of quizzes in Moodle. Moodle's got a very good quiz engine, but it doesn't do very well with mathematics. You can even put, that should be standalone, you can even put a problem in a web page all by itself and have it rendered by the PG layer of WeBWorK. Okay, so that's the difference between WeBWorK 2 and PG. We usually just use WeBWorK 2 for the whole thing, but that's the front end. And PG is the really important part that does the mathematics. I didn't quite finish, I guess. When PG is finished, it renders the HTML part of the problem itself, and it's passed back to WeBWorK 2, which puts all that navigation things to find the other problems, all the things that occur on the left edge of the page and on the top of the page. It returns the HTML to Apache, which translates it into something the browser can understand, sends it back to the browser. So there's the round trip of a request object. Is there any questions about this? Is that typical for a client-server model? Okay, what are the other components of WeBWorK? Well, there's the open problem library, which is just a collection of all these PG problems and the text and so on. It's been authored by the academic community. This is another one of our strengths compared to a lot of the commercial models, is because these things were created mostly by mathematics professors for the students they were teaching. So they tend to be, they're not always, but they tend to be of somewhat higher quality than the ones that were made by graduate students who were paid by the companies to make a bunch of problems. They're all Creative Commons share and share alike license, so you can take them and modify them and use them yourself. Again, they're not uniformly of high quality, but John Jones and Jeff Holt have, John Jones is at Arizona State University, have been holding library camps in which they go through this library collection and curate it. They take the problems and eliminate duplicates, improve things, and so on. The database that we use is usually MySQL, although in principle you should be able to use other kinds of databases as well. But for initial setup, use MySQL because that's well tested. What other things does WeBWorK 2 do? Well, WeBWorK 2 and Apache log nearly everything that happens. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what's available. When you get to the point where you're starting to ask questions, you'll have other people will show you where to find these logs and how you can use them. So the access log simply records every request that's made to Apache. You can use this to find out whether certain students and IP addresses and so on have logged into Apache recently. The error log reports errors if somebody's tried to log in and they didn't have the right authorization, or they had incorrect URLs, they were trying to log into a course that didn't exist, for example, or if there was an error in rendering the PG problem. That happens sometimes, particularly if you edit your own. In order to read the logs, it requires command line access. There's no high-level interface, but it's a good way for when something goes wrong, it's a good way of checking things. Checking the error log in particular is something that people often forget. There's one log that I forgot to mention, which is the course log, and that actually tells you that every time a student logs in, it records their name. You can use that in an emergency to determine whether a student says, well, I did my homework and I logged in and so on and so forth. You can check that log if you care that much and find out whether they did log in or not. Mostly it's homework, so I tend to just take them at their word for it and say, okay, I'll give you another 3 days to do your homework. But that's my personal way. So the next thing, okay, so that's the first overview of what a client-server model looks like and what the kinds of questions you should ask about what WeBWorK is. Where are the logs, open problem library. WeBWorK 2 and PG are the two big software components of it, plus the open library. Okay, how do you get your questions answered? Well, surprisingly, as is usual with the web, Google is often your friend. If you can get enough keywords and just Google it, you will often get an answer. Even the entire web is not aware of WeBWorK, but enough of it is so that you will often get an answer. So the wiki, and I didn't put a URL here for a wiki, so that's the first thing to do. Actually, here I'll type it in right now. So if you didn't know where the wiki was, you should learn about it. It's http://webwork.maa.org/wiki, and I've forgotten how to make that a link right off the bat. But that'll allow you to sign up for it. And that's a place. This is a place to get a lot of information. There are two search engines available in the upper left-hand corner. I'll show them to you in just a minute. One of the things we're going to do is break in a few minutes, and I'm going to have you sign up on the wiki if you haven't already done this, because signing up for membership in the wiki controls posting access to the forums. And that's the second thing you should know about for places to find things. The forums are quite active. People monitor them and are very friendly. And if you ask a question, if somebody knows the answer, they're likely to answer it quite quickly. If you're not answered really quickly, it's usually because nobody quite knows how to respond to it. The other two things that are connected to from the wiki are blogs, and blogs are individual, so it's actually a blog aggregator. So there's 6 or 7 of us who make blog posts about once every 2 months or something like that. They show up on this aggregator, and this is the place to find out about the latest features about WeBWorK, what's going on with development, sometimes tricks are described, and so on. Finally, if you're interested, and actually this is probably a good thing to be ready for if you're doing a lot of sysadmin stuff, you can sign up on the development list serve, and you will occasionally you will have reports about what's happening in the development area. So this way you'll know, for example, how close we are to the next release, because you'll hear various people talking about what the current bugs are and what's changing and so on. So if you're interested in that stuff, getting up on the mail list is a good thing to do. This is what the wiki main page looks like, and I'll give you a hint to start working on your task. Here's the breakout. Here's the one of the search engines is right here. There's another search engine here, which you get by, this is the Google search engine, but it's specialized to look at any site that has WeBWorK in it. So this is the internal, this first one is the internal wiki search, and Go will take, if you actually know the name of a page in the wiki, you can get there with Go. Otherwise, if you're searching for content, you click on search. Wikis are great, and they're editable, and once you guys are signed up for it, which you do up in the right-hand corner here, where mine says log out because I'm signed in at the moment. But once you're signed up for it, you can edit it yourself. So all of you people, if there's stuff that's inaccurate and so on, you can help with that. Don't worry about messing things up. There's a history. We can change it again. As I said, wikis are great, but they are very much like the web. There's a lot of information on this wiki, an awful lot of information, but it's hard to find. And searching for it is probably the best way to find it. Sometimes you'll find 2 pieces of information that are somewhat contradictory, so you'll have to guess which one is the later piece of information. Again, it's very much like the web in general. It's somewhat chaotic, but it does have a lot of information. The forums and the blogs are linked from these 2 places right here. There's also databases which will tell you some things. There's a site map which tells you things about about WeBWorK installations, and you can read the rest of the page.